One of them that was on the list was how to reset MFA. I can literally do that in like 5 minutes.
Gaddis?
No,
Or the Sophos?
Sophos. So some of our clients, I'm starting to push out two-factor authentication for VPN clients. So whenever someone's code is no longer working, or if they're having issues with their code and typing their password, generally it's the password anyway, but if you need to reset it and have them reconnect it, you have to have them delete the code because it will not prompt you for a new QR code when you log back in. So that one specifically. We have Health Tech that has them, so as well as St. Francis.
I think their health tech's turned off right now.
Health Tech is turned off for the data center. The VPN client that they had previously on site is still there. Don't have Health Tech in here. So we're gonna go to St. Francis. That's all. I'm assuming this is everyone then?
I think so.
Okay. I'll knock the simplest one out. So how to reset MFA. So once you're in the firewall, and this is specifically for St. Francis, you're gonna go to authentication on the left, and at the top, multi-factor authentication. And then for whatever user that you need to reset, you'll have to find their account in here and just delete it. That's really as simple as it is. And then you'll have to log back into the user portal to re-download it, or to get the new QR code for them to scan.
You import those users, or you have to make them all yourself?
No, we import, I have them set up with Active Directory to the domain controller, and there's a specific group named
The
remote.
Sophos group or something?
Yeah, it's remote SSL VPN users. Oh, you missed the first lesson.
I don't know where I'm gonna need these though. I might need paper. Just dig in.
What?
Dig in, we don't touch it.
No, so briefly what I went over real quick is, if you need to reset a two-factor authentication code for VPN clients.
It's okay.
Yep, it's okay. You've done it, so you know where it's at, authentication, MFA, and
Delete it.
Yep, okay, perfect.
Forms. You're gonna ask me faster.
Let's see. So, I guess I'll just start with making exceptions on a firewall for whitelists. Let's see if I can do it. Do they have, well, first off, let's see if this firewall has decryption scan. This is St. Francis. So what you'll do is you go to rules and policies, under firewall rules, decryption scan is applied on the outbound traffic. I've made every firewall have a group named outbound access, but if you want to, you can you can filter it out by choosing the source zone as whatever internal, so any, and destination zone is WAN. And why is it telling you none? Oh, because it's, never mind, it's specific to any. Hold on, turn off that. And so now we'll see all the outbound rules. There's LAN to WAN excluding sources. So these are probably machines that we don't want to have decryption scan on and with guest Wi-Fi. So LAN to WAN, this is your firewall rule that's outbound. And near the bottom, under security services, if they have decryption scan, it's going to have this checked off, scan HTTP and decrypted HTTPS. This is going to tell it to scan that traffic if it is decrypted. Well, it's not yet. The options on the right use web proxy instead of DPI engine, and then web proxy options decrypt HTTPS during the web proxy filter. So this one is tied to this one, which is tied to this one. And then on the left here, you have the web policy, default workplace policy. That's the one I choose, or I set for the default. I usually modify that one. And that's when we'll have the content filtering in here. So the categories, social networking is allowed. These are user activities, which are the same, it's just a group of all the different categories. Weapons, extreme, so on and so forth. So it is enabled here. So if we needed to make a whitelist for this.
Weapons?
Yeah, so if I went to Glock.com, it would be blocked. It's gonna provide you a content filtering page blocked from someone's firewall. So I guess Glock.com, let's exclude that. So you're gonna go to web, at the top, exceptions. This is gonna exclude it from decrypt and scan, which happens before content filtering. So during the process of decrypt and scan and content filtering, if the firewall can't see the HTTPS traffic because it hasn't decrypted it, it's not gonna be able to whitelist it.
HTTP traffic is always encrypted.
HTTPS?
HTTPS, sorry.
Yes.
Yeah. It's always.
Yes.
I mean the S means secure, but it
Yeah.
means that it's encrypted.
Correct. So that's what we're actually breaking. And most traffic nowadays, I forgot the actual percentage of it, but it was like 80–90%. I'm sure it's like 95% nowadays. So pretty much everything is gonna be HTTPS. Otherwise it's plain text. So the firewall would be able to see the web URL requests coming across. But you need decrypt and scan to see it. So that's where this comes in. We're gonna whitelist it from being decrypted. So, add an exception. Just one second, real quick. Right quick, I'm just gonna grab this syntax, or it's regex. It's what the firewall additionally uses as a wildcard, really. You can't just put star dot whatever website. It actually looks at this specific code here. The up arrow dictates it starts at the beginning of the line, and then we have the range. So the bracket here is beginning this range. Capital letters A through Z, lower letters A through Z, 0 through 9, and then special characters, period to dash, which.
Suppose it doesn't need a comma or something.
Well, then we get to the wildcard character, which is star, backslash, and then that's where it begins at .acronis.com for this one. So that's gonna be the first period. So like if it was www.glock.com, if there was a subdomain that was maybe signin.glock.com, it would whitelist that as well if you did this. And so we'll do that now. So that's glock.com. I'm not gonna actually go to the website, but what?
That's on the firewall itself, not on Software Central. You're in the firewall.
Yeah, I'm on the firewall. Actually, to do this properly, let me do this from, I opened up the server so I can actually show you, rather than do this from St. Francis.
Is there a website actually called Block.com?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a handgun.
So they don't want people buying guns or something?
So I set this firewall up in the data center. It's under Shadow Lab. We'll do it here instead. And to confirm that it works, should Glock.com as weapons.
I like that it tells you the reason why. It tells the end user why as well.
And
You can
Sophos-
customize that too.
Sophos has its own like classification as weapons sites, porn
Yes,
sites.
so when you get a website that is registered, say as weapon, or if it's miscategorized, you're gonna have to go to Sophos support to tell them to reclassify it. They're the ones that dictate that. So let's do. Forgot I imported this. I ran out of exceptions on this one, but so block.com. You're gonna turn on all the settings on the right, HTTPS decryption, so that's gonna exclude it from that, malware and content scanning and policy checks. Go click URL patterns and type in block.com, enter. I also like to add block.com, just in case the certificate, well in the certificate, it can match a wildcard, because if we go to, let's see if they have a wildcard, they might not. Yeah, so see what I was saying earlier, us.block.com, it would whitelist that. So if we look at this certificate, site settings, connection is secure, certificate is valid. This common name here, star.block.com, that's how they purchase their certificate. It's a wildcard, so to include any other web pages for it. So let's go ahead and add that. And then that syntax for regex, paste that in here and rename this domain. Add that, save it, and then go test it. So you will have to refresh the page with no cache. When I refresh this, doesn't always work, but this kind of does. You can use Control F5 to refresh a page without the cache, or just go to Chrome and incognito mode.
What does it actually mean to refresh the page without the cache? I mean, not to use what it has lower in the cache?
Yes.
Okay.
So if a page is acting kind of funny, maybe it's not loading every image on the page, and
Good to know.
this wasn't a perfect example because some websites will load other web pages in the background. So they're actually I'll try to find something. MSN is probably a decent one, but there might be other URLs that this page pulls that's not at the top. So, and we'll go in that in a second. But,
Why, to just make it faster to access?
it's called CDNs. They're content delivery networks. So Facebook, for example, uses CDNs. No matter where you're at in the world, right? You can scroll through Facebook and it will deliver images to you fairly fast. Well, those images aren't stored in one place. They're stored in data centers all around the world. And those are called content delivery networks. They're where they're set up there. And that's what those are going to be pulling from. So that might not match Facebook.com. What it will match though is fbcdn.net. And so it's not the best idea to whitelist CDNs, but sometimes you have to. Because, well, the reason it could be bad is there could be a bad actor that hides their malware on one of those CDNs and pushes it through. An example of that would be Play-Doh right now. I'm having to deal with kids are looking up the word unblocked for games to get around content filtering.
I used to do that.
Yeah, I did too. And they're going to, it's just a CDN website, actually, it's sites.google.com, that's their CDN, but there's a web hosted server there that just has all of those games, like Minecraft, in the browser. But that would be a reason you don't want to do whitelisting of CDNs.
Yeah. Those kids are smart.
Did you block cool math games for them?
I have actually blocked cool math games.
No.
Let's just I would use that website for the unblock, but I've actually been having trouble with trying to actually block it. Let's see another one. let's just go to mxm.net or something. .com.
You need to block the execution of JavaScript.
Of what?
JavaScript,
I can, but it's gonna be invasive. It's gonna block it all over the computer too.
well, can you tie it to a login, student login, if this student logs in Java?
They need to do that from their Google platform. It's a lot easier to do it there than it is from Firewall. So if you press F12 while on a web page, it's going to give you the developer console. And what we're going to be able to do is either go to console or sources. I start with sources. It's going to show you all the extra websites that the page is loading in the background. I just happen to choose MSN because it's a lot. Like, it's mainly because they have so many ads on their page. But you can see taboola.com, btloader, msn.com, doubleclick.net. This is an ad resource. Ad-delivery.net. Those are more CDNs for ads, things like that. Does anyone have to have a website that
There's a lot.
Publix? I blocked general business.
Oh.
I was testing. I put that under the teacher policy.
What's the reason you said to block Publix?
General business,
What's that? You can't
probably buying stuff like while they're at work or wherever.
shopping.
General business is actually something I usually whitelist. So that's funny that it's actually blocked in here.
In what network is that server? Is that server that you're,
It's in the shadow lab. It's on the bench in the back right corner.
but is it connected to, I mean, that firewall that you're managing, which firewall is it?
Shadow lab.
Okay. Makes sense.
Y'all can do whatever you want in this network, by the way. It's a test environment. So, real quick, under Kaseya, it's Data Tech Shadow Lab.
Okay.
We have just 5 Hyper-Vs in here that you can boot up servers, workstations, and test. If there's anything you need to run, feel free. That's what it's there for. You're not gonna break anything.
Okay.
Still run an hour in it, or if you do, I mean, if you do, just let us know so we can wipe it and start over.
Okay. There we go.
So, back to F12.
What is the command for refreshing without cache? Again?
Control F5.
Okay.
Or you could just delete the cache and close the browser and then reopen it, but
That sounds.
yeah, it takes a little bit longer. There's also just going to incognito.
Oh, that's true.
So this one has these.
Can you do Twitter?
I can. Well, it's gonna be blocked. That one I'm sure is blocked. Really? Did I not have social media?
Thought I saw it as one of the first one.
Prior reason. So you have probably ChatGPT and all those.
Social media's not in here.
Elon went in and unblocked him.
Those are the policies.
Oh, something went wrong. There you go. We can figure out what went wrong. So, that's actually a good idea. Network. This is the next best thing, network. So when you have an error on a page, almost always it's going to be logins for clients when they're logging into banks for whatever reason. No, well, not for whatever reason, but banks actually block decrypted scan. It's because it's technically a man-in-the-middle attack, because between the web browser and the web server, the firewall is decrypting that session and scanning it, and then re-encrypting that traffic, and then sending it to the web server. That is a man-in-the-middle attack. The way that it's allowed to do that is the certificate that's on the firewall is it's called a certificate of authority. So the chain of trust for websites, there's a certificate of authority, and then higher up than that is a root certificate authority. Root certificate authorities assign certificate authorities, and that's gonna be GoDaddy, DigiCert, Let's Encrypt, things like that. And they assign certificates, which is where you put them on your servers, or web servers. So, well, that's all combined into one box on this firewall because it's called a self-signed certificate. It is a root CA, it is the certificate authority, and no one trusts it. Microsoft Certificate Store, they manage all the trust for root CAs and CAs, so you don't have to deal with it. But for these firewalls, since they're self-assigned, you have to take the certificate of authority and drop it into Microsoft Certificate Store. That's essentially what decryption scanner do. That's how it's allowed to do it. You're telling your browser you trust the firewall, you let it do it. So if you refresh though while on network, it's going to reach out to pages. What's going to end up happening is something's going to break, and you're going to see it. So this URL, abs.twimg.com, I'm assuming that's going to be their CDN. We're going to copy that. We're going to whitelist it. It's going to tell me now again. I'm just going to add it to, I'll delete this one.
I tried to add another whitelist website to a list, but it had like 128 entries and it didn't let me. It said that I had to create a new one.
Yep. So it was on an older firmware. This, in newer firmwares, they actually made it like unlimited.
Okay.
I don't know, actually, I don't know how unlimited, because I haven't gotten to 256 yet on one of them. It's bits of like binary, so 128, I'm assuming 256 is gonna be the next. But I've certainly hit it, the total amount of individual exclusions on this firewall, specifically Plato. That's where I copied this one from.
So you copy the profile from for all the rules, just port it
I
all
took
the
a
rules.
backup config from Plato and I just popped it into this.
Imported it here, yeah. I saw that with the Ubiquiti switches, but this is not a switch though.
No.
But I saw how they were able to actually get the configuration from another switch and import it into a new one.
There you go.
Ooh.
There you go.
Well, I think that's fancy.
So it's gonna be a lot. It's gonna continually do this in the background for how far you scroll.
Wow.
Yeah. But developer tools, network, this is a great tool. I don't know if I have any applications to run, but that Fiddler tool, Telerik Fiddler, it would be easier for me to hand out the executable. If you go to their website for a download, they ask you for email info, yeah. But just installing it, it's fairly lightweight. But what it allows you to do is, remove all of this traffic. Is if you have an application that's a user is trying to run, let's see if I can just do it in Chrome. There is the button right here called Any Process. If you click this and drag and drop to it, it will target a specific PID for that application. Process ID. So let's minimize this a little bit because we're gonna have to click and drag. and it'll target whatever application and then specify just that. And so now you'll see here Chrome, and then it's big. And that's another way we can try to find where whatever application is at this point, where it's trying to go to. And you can get the URL that way.
What are some of the other utilities of the software here?
I'm sure there's a lot more, but I don't need to use it for web development. I'm not a web dev. This is just what I primarily use it for, to be completely honest. But, yeah. It's already changed. It's probably not best to use it on Chrome, but I promise it works. Let's see, what else can we do? Any other questions about,
Can you block Twitter again?
can I block Twitter? Absolutely. I'm gonna have to remove the whitelist I did.
Okay.
It wasn't called Twitter, it was TWI image or something.
Mm-hmm.
So here, but before I do that, let's go and add. Let's add a content filter, block for it. So under this content filtering policy,
Drink real quick, just keep going.
I'm gonna add a rule. I'm just gonna add one at the top of it. First, you need to turn it on. Just make sure you remove all web traffic from your blocks, because that's the default. And yes, it will block all web traffic.
Actually, Jesus Christ.
It would lose like, internet.
Yeah. They won't get anywhere.
Social networking. You have to change it from user activity to URL group. No, not URL group, I'm sorry. Web category. So let's go ahead and do that.
So it's just setting up that category and it will take care of the rest. For blocking, for example, Twitter.
Yeah, it's gonna take care of Facebook, Instagram, all those.
What if I want to block something specific like an airline website? I mean,
Spirit.
I probably know it is the category, but let's say some that is not categorized. In that case, you
would
will have to contact Sophos, as you said.
No, you would need to make a URL group
Okay.
at the top, and then apply that specific URL group in here. So there's one right here for blocked student sites. Keep in mind, you can't just do this. You have to make sure decrypt and scan is on to do all that. So you can't just turn on this content filtering policy and apply it to it, because it'll start decrypting it. If you do this right here, block HTTPS, this is going to apply decrypt and scan to their network as well. So if it detects, not globally, but it will apply it to those websites if you can see it. Because it's going to try to decrypt it so it can confirm, well, oh, this is HTTPS, I'm going to block it. The web proxy actually, like, while it has the encrypted traffic decrypted, it injects it with a web portal, which is that block page. Yeah. That's how you can get. We'll go to it in a second, but anyway, social networking, you have to make sure HTTPS is blocked as well as HTTP, and then we're just going to hit apply. So now that should be saved. We'll go back here, go to Twitter, and so specifically what I was talking about though is this page still shows Twitter. So the payload that was actually being returned, the firewall injected this block page into the traffic. Twitter.com is still there. There's a new way to do decrypt and scan with a new DPI engine, which instead just redirects you to the firewall at an, it's just gonna say, yeah, the page is blocked, but the IP at the top is gonna show the firewall IP and a block port, which
So
is fine for the most part, but like, prefer that way.
Yeah.
when the site is blocked,
It looks the same.
I just want to understand how traffic works. Whenever a user types twitter.com,
Yep.
what that request where it goes to the firewall first.
The long version, okay, it goes to the DNS server first. Whatever the DNS server is, whether it's public DNS or whether it's an internal domain controller, it goes there first. The let's say it's the domain controller. The domain controller returns back to the computer twitter.com's IP address. Your computer goes and says, all right, I need to go to 47, whatever, public IP address. Well, it's not local. It's gonna go out, it's gonna look at your network adapter. It doesn't exist there locally, so it's gonna send it to the gateway. Whatever the gateway is with NIC 1, let's say it's 192.168.1.1, which is your firewall, it's gonna send it there. Firewall is going to then say, hey, is it anywhere else in this network? No, okay, then I'll send it to my gateway, which is out port 2 interface, per se, whatever. Say Frontier. You're going to what, Twitter? So, at the same time, let's say 2 people do this at the exact same time, in a perfect world, literally down to the millisecond. It's also going to remap the source port from 443 to whatever random other port number. Because if 2 people leave at the same time, go to the same website, and return back to the firewall at the same time, it won't know how to send it back to you versus me. So what it does is it remaps that source port to a random number, and so on the way back, when it sees that whatever remapped source port number, it knows, okay, well that was traffic for you, for me. But yeah, so from then it's just forwards it over to the web server.
I just wanted to know how the process was. So when it is blocked, it doesn't actually even go outside the firewall.
No, it blocks it right there.
Exactly.
Yeah. So this doesn't make a request to, yeah, no, this doesn't make it doesn't make a request out to the web server.
Just wanted to understand just the concepts of what happened behind, because it helped me actually, these analogies made me know actually what we're doing.
Also, that source port remapping, there's also another side of it where once you hit the firewall, what the firewall does, it's a NAT device, network address translation router. So it takes internal traffic, or it's a bridge between an internal network and an external network. Because if you leave with an internal network into the external public IP space, no other device is going to be able to return back to you, because they all know that they're internal, so it's going to drop it. So what it does, as you leave, it's going to remap your IP address on the way out with the public IP address that you have on the firewall. So, for example, 192.168.1.10 tries to leave the network and go out to the public. Your public IP is 47.1.1. whatever, 10. You would leave and then be remapped with that public IP. And then it would be sent to the server. Anything else? We can keep going. We can do the ACLs and whatnot.
The what?
ACLs, Access Control List. That's where the firewall rules are. Those are a little bit easier. Well, maybe. So under network, we have port 1, which is our LAN, local network. 192.168.168.168. That can be whatever you want it to be, or whatever the client decides it to be at the time. We have what's called zones. Zones are just a way for you or I to easily describe or place networks in. The firewall doesn't care what they're called, but for all intents and purposes, if you wanted to have multiple networks, but all name maybe 3 networks, but put them all in what, say, a workstation network or a workstation zone, you could do that. Or just by default, it's called LAN. You can make your own, they're essentially groups of networks. And that's how the firewall is going to work with the ACLs or firewall rules. So if we add a new firewall rule, you're going to see in here, give it a name, test. The source zone is going to be some of those zones where they actually exist. Whether across their site-to-site VPN, you'd actually have to put that. So if maybe in the Brandon office, it's 192.168.2, and here locally is 192.168.1, and you wanted to set up an additional rule for LAN to VPN, you could do that. But you will have to specify LAN, and then across that VPN if you've already had a VPN created. Or if you're making a new network and you wanted to give that network internet access, you'd have to set it up with WAN. But going back to that, the IP address needing to be the public IP, that exists under here. So when you're making an outbound rule, it's important to create the linked NAT rule, and then you scroll down here under translation, you change translated source to masquerade. That's just it remapping it as the public IP or whatever interface that it leaves on. Not doing this will cause it not to have internet, because it'll leave with as an IP address on the local.
I'm not on lunch.
Are you on? Yeah, I'm on lunch.
I'm not on lunch.
Are you not? Are we supposed to go back after our lunch is over?
I don't know.
I was told they gave some hours.
Oh, an hour? Okay, no.
This is work.
Close that out. Let's see. What are the additional things you can do? You can do a little bit or you can do a lot. So like restricting down, or what I mean by that is so this source zone, if you know that it was LAN and you only have one interface, okay, maybe you don't need to specify the actual network that it's coming from as well, but you can create a new address object, and make a network here, make it local network, change it to network, and put in the network ID, and then specify it so it has to, so not only does this local network have to be in the LAN zone, but it also has to match that IP address, or that IP network.
What would the rule do? What would that rule do? You haven't specified anything, right?
WAN, it would just allow it out to the internet.
Allow access to the internet.
Yeah, this is essentially the same thing as this rule here, LAN to WAN. LAN, WAN. It has a NAT rule that has it source netted.
It's just to allow traffic.
Yeah, and this would just be allowing traffic out to the internet.
So all companies have that rule implemented.
Yeah. Otherwise, they don't have internet.
Okay. Me as an engineer, network engineer, I would leave a couple of business without internet. I mean, this is the first time because there are things.
Yeah.
Whenever we do port forwarding for printers, I've seen that you have to actually sometimes get involved because you have to enable a port in the firewall to actually allow communication. Because how do you do that? I mean, and why do you need to do that? If
So there's two parts to that. So So it's going to matter if we are trying to add a printer driver to a terminal server, say in our data center,
Correct. Yeah.
to them.
It's in DT hosting, for example.
Yes.
I saw it for a customer that was working on DT hosting.
Correct. So if we're trying to send a print job to a public IP on their end, and you put the public IP address as the destination in the printer driver with the port let's call it 9100. Let's use the port number. So you're going to send to the public IP 9100. Well, that public IP isn't going to know what to do with it immediately. The default for a firewall is to drop all traffic. If it's not specified, it's going to drop it. So it's not just going to let it in and know where the printer is. You have to tell it where the printer is. So that's what a port forward is. So you're opening up your public IP and telling it, okay, if you see something hit this public IP with this port number 9100, you send it here.
So it's a rule they have created in the firewall.
Correct. With a NAT rule as well. NAT is network address translation. What that is though is, it's the backwards side of, instead of leaving from LAN to WAN, it's WAN to LAN. And you're changing from the public IP, the destination, to the LAN.
So you would do it in the same place, that you were doing the other rule?
Yes, but it's a little bit different.
Yeah. You told me that the destination is kind of inverted.
Yeah. So I can go through the wizard, which is it's not gonna explain anything, but it'll do it for you. We can do that real quick. It's just gonna tell you, like, the wizard's just gonna ask you what the IP, what your internal IP is. It's gonna ask you if you wanna change the public IP to something else. And then what port, and then it's gonna build everything out for you, which is easy enough.
When they ask you the internal IP, what IP you gonna actually?
The local printer IP address.
Okay.
At the office. So, let's try this here. Let's call it so it's 192.168.168. Let's say the printer is .50. Actually, no, this is fine, 50. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It's gonna give it a predetermined name, it's gonna put the name in there for you. We're just gonna click next. I would recommend you name it if you're gonna use the wizard. Then it's gonna ask you for the public IP. Select the public IP address or WAN interface. If you click the drop down, these are the interfaces. You would just choose whatever public interface. It is important to know though, if you make a port forward and that port forward is already, or if there's already a pre-existing port forward, you can break the pre-existing port forward. Only one, so it's 1-to-1. So like if you have a public IP, like here, 99.239, and I already had something in there for 9100. It was already in there. The rules are top to bottom. What's gonna happen is if you make one over it and you send it to, say, server or printer A, and there was already one in there for printer B. Well, printer B is no longer gonna work because printer A is gonna set this on top of it. In the firewall rules, they're top down.
Why do you have two printers? As you are saying,
If you have two printers,
have to open two ports?
yep. And now you get to do something called port address translation. So instead of using 9100 and 9100, you use 91 and 1. And then you redirect 9101 to 9100 on the inside.
I guess
And
but it's good to
that's
know.
port address translation. What that does, that's also what people call security by obscurity, which is not security by any means. So like, the reason people call it that is because, oh, we opened up RDP to the world, but we changed the public or the port number on it to 10 or like 13389 or some other number. You can use any port number, it doesn't matter.
Do these, like, printer redirects or whatever, rules apply if they're on a VPN and they wanna print, you know, at
Well, with
home, from, let's say they're on Parallels or something.
Okay,
Or a
let's say they're on
printer-
Parallels.
A printer at their house, they want.
Okay,
Okay.
well, no. Then let's say they're at their house and they're on Parallels, what?
And
They
can
wanna print, and they wanna print to their local printer?
Mhm.
Well, then they'll just,
Parallels.
they're just gonna use Parallels for it.
Yeah, but, okay. If they got on the VPN, you know, this is.
So
gonna
a
get
VPN
complicated.
client?
Like, for instance, Health Tech.
Yes.
They won me last night. They had to get on VPN to authenticate, to get in, to get to network drives, whatever.
Yes.
And then they wanted to use Parallels to do whatever. And then-
To print?
Yeah, to print.
But I also was RDP.
But-
because-
So-
They have they have Parallels this time.
Well, they're not logging into anything. They're just logging into their workstation and they have access to their local printer.
Yeah, she has one over there and one at her house. She has a laptop in there.
So you're talking about one at the office?
Right, there's one at the office and one at her, she's using one at home. You don't,
That would need to be shared. And not only that, the site-to-site VPN is not there for her to join the VPN client to
if she
data
turns
center,
off the VPN.
to go to the office, to go to the printer.
If
That's
she-
not configured.
Once she's connected, or after she's logged in, she turns off the self VPN and just does Parallels, then it'll work.
Yeah, just use, for right now, she should just use Parallels to print locally. If she needs to print from her home to the office.
I guess, do you think the
Send someone
VPN
in the office.
is causing a conflict? If she's running, cause, you know, I turn on VPN so she can get her network drives.
No,
Right, locally.
It
at
won't
her
resist.
house. It won't.
No, unless her local network happens to match their network, which it doesn't, it's 10.130.130. It'll be fine, but back to this port forward, look through the wizard. So this service, this is where you're gonna put in whatever port number, let's say it's 9100. It's,
Before, you had to specify like the IP address, the public IP. The public IP is the IP of here, right? If we are using the,
it depends on the firewall you're logged into. If you're in the data center, just know that there's 1,000 IPs in there, just be careful which one you use.
no, I mean.
I'm just saying.
Mhm.
We have 1,000 IPs in the data center. We have 96, 97, 98, and 99. So what I mean by that is, if those are 4/24s, we own all of them. And it's 96/0 or /22 really. Something like that. That's different. Here, let's just make this one the HTTP for, I don't feel like making it. So you'll click next. The next thing I would recommend, if possible, you source restrict things. So if you're gonna make a port forward, you're essentially poking a hole in your firewall and allowing a service through it directly to a device. If it's a web server, that's probably fine, but just know that if it's something like RDP, you might want to restrict who it's to. Don't open up RDP though. You can restrict who is allowed access to it. So if a certain company has a static IP, you can put their static IP in here and allow only them to be able to log in. I've done that before with like SQL, to do SQL database updates and shit. You would just put them in here. Click next. Makes me put any. How do I choose any?
It was the first one, right?
Wow, okay, hold on.
Well,
No,
what
it-
is that?
it-
That's what I was asking you. What?
No, it was on the next two pages.
Yeah, but that
Services.
IP that you just showed, that's
That-
here, right?
That is the public IP.
Oh, okay, okay.
That's on port 2.
Okay, that's what I wanted to know.
And then, next, and then it's gonna give you a little summary of what you're doing. So the internal is 168.168.50. That's the name of it. Here's your public IP that you chose. And here's the service that we're allowing it to do. And it's gonna create 3 NAT rules. The reason it creates 3 is 1, outside inbound to the web server. That's the normal one, inbound. You have your outbound, which just allows the same traffic from inside back out, which you won't need to do that if you ever create one manually. The generic outbound rule will cover that. And then you also have what's called a loopback. And the reason a loopback is here is in case someone does something wrong. So in the case of web servers, let's say you open up your web server, AmericanToolMold.com or whatever, and that's internal to your network. You're opening up that server to the world on your public IP. Okay, you set up your DNS incorrectly. Well, outside you have your DNS that forwards DNS requests from American Tool and Mold to your public IP. Okay, well, you're inside your office now, and your DNS still points towards that public IP. LAN to WAN to LAN is not covered by this rule, because you made a WAN to LAN rule. You would essentially have to make a rule that says LAN to LAN, but hits your public IP address to come back inside. That's what that's what the loopback is for, and that's why it's called a loopback. So you leave and come back.
Okay.
It's only because you didn't set up your DNS right. If your internal DNS is set up right, you won't go to the public IP, you'll go to the internal IP of the web server. Make sense?
Where do you set up the DNS? You see it in the domain controller?
Domain controller. It's almost always on a DC.
Okay.
Save and finish. Now, if any of you want to mess around with this firewall and make port forwards, by all means go for it. Just don't. Just make sure you only use 99.239.
99, 239.
Yeah.
You send that to us and
I'll take a
teams.
picture of it.
Yeah.
They'll be messing in the same circuit, in the same firewall at the same time.
Just let me know if I need to like reset it or anything. Just real quick, the last thing I wanted to show is what makes this weird is if you're looking at it in Sophos, is when you're going through this firewall rule, for the port forwards, it shows the source as WAN, your destination as LAN. However, the destination network is actually the port 2 interface or the public IP, because that's what it hits first. That's in the firewall rules. It's a common mistake. I made it, even some other people that I've given these firewalls to for clients, they will tend to put the LAN interface, the printer IP address in here. Because it makes sense. Destination, oh, it's gonna be your internal IP, but it's the public IP first. It has to hit that first, and then in your NAT rule, you actually change it from that's where you do the NAT translation. You change the public IP to the internal.
So why we cannot reset passwords? I mean, it's not that I do it every day, but why we cannot do it from here and we can do it from Sopo Central? Of the Wi-Fi, sorry. At the end,
My Wi-Fi?
Yeah.
What passwords are you resetting? The Wi-Fi password?
Yeah, it's hypothetical. It's not that I'm gonna reset the password.
No,
but
no, no.
I have to do it always from Sopo Central and not from the firewall itself. Why?
It's because that's just where the management is. So the Sophos APXs, they are configured and set up and managed entirely by Sophos Central. That's why. There is the option to actually adopt them in here, but the settings that are actually in the firewall are a lot more limited. For one, you wouldn't be able to log into Sofa Central and be able to manage it anymore. You'd have to manage it from the firewall, which has less features, so I don't use it there, unfortunately.
Okay. I just was curious because one day I did it in Software Central and the other day I just tried to do it in the firewall itself and I said, well, I don't have a setting here to actually modify the password.
No, but
That's
it
what-
does give you the option if you ever wanted to. If you were setting one up for the first time, you plug it into the network where the firewall is, as long as it gets an IP address, it will sit here and it'll try to adopt it. So it'll be up underneath here pending access points. You just accept it. And then now it's in here and you manage it. But you no longer ever manage it from, or you would no longer want to manage it from the partner portal or central portal. That's all that is. It's just that,
So everything can be centrally managed.
yeah, there's more control up in the cloud. And also you don't have to log directly into this thing.